Right, welcome back to another video on bot building for beginners. So what we're going to do today, we're going to build a weather bot. I was going to tell the user the weather from their location from Chatfuel. A few people have asked for tutorials where I pass data from Chatfuel and then we use that in an external API call. And then we can pass data back from that API back to Chatfuel. Someone else asked about using API keys. So today we're going to learn a little bit about those. And we're going to learn about keeping the keys safe. We're going to retrieve the data from the API, return it back to Chatfuel. And what we'll also do is we'll set some attributes which we can then use in Chatfuel. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so here's a dashboard in Chatfuel for my bot, Mark Bots. It's where I do all my testing. Let's set it up to call our API that we had last time. So let's create a new block. We'll call it weather. What we're going to do is we're going to initially, because we're going to use some variables, we're going to set up some variables and I'm going to set them to be nothing. So let's set up what we got, weather, weather description, and the weather description is going to be nothing. And then I'm going to have weather feels like temp degrees C. This will make sense when we come to actually implement it. Okay, so we've got two variables set up there. What should we do next? Yeah, we'll do a little bit of our typing, so we pretend the user's typing. Then we'll do some text. Okay, so we'll say, where do you live? Right. Now we can ask for the user's location. So at this point, it's going to give us some attributes or user variables that we're going to be able to pass to our API. So the things that we're going to need are going to be longitude and latitude, which tell us where we are in the world. And we're going to pass those to our weather API. So next up, let's call a JSON API. So if you remember last time, I had this project in Glitch called Right Tongue, great name. What we're going to do is going to add a new endpoint to this, which is going to tell us all about the weather. Okay, let's go back to the dashboard. So we're going to call this. Going to add in a JSON API block. Again, we're going to use a GET request. I'm going to make it to our URL. So if you remember, we can just do, and we show this live here. So we can do righttongue.glitch.me, and last time we did jokes. That gave us this. So what we'll do is we'll do something called weather. Now at the moment this won't exist. Okay, cannot get weather. Okay, we go back and we're going to implement it in a minute. So what we'll do is we're going to call weather, which is our API endpoint there, which we're about to create. But what we're going to do is we're going to pass what are called query parameters. So you do a question mark here. Now after the question mark, there's a single question mark which denotes that you're going to start putting query parameters in. So what we're going to have is we're going to have latitude. And what we can do is we can now take this latitude here. So if you do curly brackets, latitude, take that. Now if you want more than one query parameter, you don't put another question mark. Instead you put an ampersand. Okay, so we'll do longitude equals and then longitude. Okay, so what we're going to do is when we make this request, we're going to pass two variables here. Okay, and these will come from Chatfuel. So if we open this website, latlong.net, let's have a look. Let's have a look for the White House. Okay, so it's latitude is 38.897676, longitude minus 77, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what we're going to do is going to just take it to three significant digits here, 38.897. And what we would do is we would pass that in here. So that's the latitude. And then the longitude, again, minus 77. Okay. So that's what we're going to eventually end up calling. Imagine we were at the White House and we gave our location as the White House. That's what we get. Okay, so after we've called the JSON API, it should return us a response. We'll let that happen, and we'll do that in our server in a minute. But what we're going to do is we're going to add some additional text. Remember I said we're going to set some attributes in our server. So let's display those attributes now. Now these are going to be the ones which we set up earlier. They're not going to be set to anything. Okay, so at the moment we'll say, but it feels like, and then we'll say temperature. So weather feels like temperature, which is that one. It feels like, and what should we say? And it is And then what we'll do is do weather description. So we'll get the weather description back from the API, which I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so let's try that in Messenger now. Okay, the last thing we need to do is set up the API to add a rule in when we do weather, when we type weather. And let's do weather. There we go. Right. So when we type weather now, we're going to get our weather. Let's try that in Messenger. Here's the bot. Let's type weather. Okay, asking me where I live. I'm going to share my location. Here's where I live. If you fancy a cup of tea, if you're in Britain. Okay, send the location. It's actually going to fail, obviously, because the JSON API is not going to do anything because it doesn't exist. Our endpoint doesn't exist. But as you can see, the variables haven't been set up yet. It says, but it feels like nothing, and it is nothing. We haven't returned any data from our API. So let's look at the weather API. What do we need from it? Let's look at this website, weatherunlock.com. So if you set yourself up an account on here, I've already done that. Let's have a look at the documentation. We've got the local weather API. It expects us to pass an app ID and an app key to the weatherunlocked.com API. We're going to look for the current weather. Let me just zoom in a little bit here so you can see it. So the expectation here to get the current weather is we have to hit api.weatherunlock.com/API/current for the current weather. We pass, let's see what it says, we pass a latitude and a longitude. So latitude, longitude there. And then you can see this has got query parameters on, so we're going to have to pass an app ID and an app key. So if you look in your dashboard here, I've obfuscated mine here, but there is an app ID and a key. They're the things we're going to need to pass through when we call the API. Okay, great. So we've got an account on Weather Unlocked. That gives us an API key and an app ID. Let's set up the endpoint now so that we can talk to it from Chatfuel. We're going to make a GET request again, like we did for our jokes. So we do app.get/ we're going to call it weather. And what we expect, so last time I did a function, we said a function. This time I'm going to show you, this is what we call ES6. This is a sort of a newer version of the way you write JavaScript. You can write a function like this with an arrow and then the curly brackets. Okay, so what we do is that has a request, so it's two parameters, a request and a response. And as always, we'll just start off with returning an empty JavaScript object back so we can test it. Okay, so that should have built. There we go. If we go to weather, we now have our endpoint. Brilliant. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is look at the request query parameters. So if you remember, we said in Chatfuel, let's have a look at JSON here. We're going to pass some query parameters called latitude and longitude. Okay, we're going to bring these out. So let's just have a look in the log. So if we do console.log request.query. Okay, let's have a look at our logs now. Okay, so when we hit it with /weather, there's an empty query parameters there. Okay, so what did we say we were going to pass? We're going to pass, remember, question mark. We're going to do latitude equals, and then we're going to do longitude. So we're going to do latitude is going to be 38.897. We're going to get the White House. And longitude equals, and what did we say it was? Okay, -77. Great stuff. Okay, so that there should, there we go, we've passed in our query parameters, so latitude and longitude. Now these are two properties on a JavaScript object. So what does that mean? What we can do now is, let's just clear our logs. What we can do now is we can say const latitude equals request.query.latitude. Okay, then we say const longitude equals request.query.longitude. Okay, so now we have those two variables. Okay, so what do we need to do with those now? We need to create our weather URL. So let's have a look at the documentation. It tells us we need to do, okay, that there. let's have a look. We'll say const weather URL equals. Okay, so what we're going to do to build up the weather URL is use something called template literals in JavaScript, or sometimes called template strings. If you do a normal string, we just put the single quotes or double quotes. But when we want to concatenate them, put them together, we'd have to do the plus sign. So we do plus, and then we do latitude equals, and then we could say plus latitude, and that takes the variable. Instead of doing that, we can use what are called template literals. So if you do backticks like that, okay, and that means we can put variables inside the string. So what we're going to do is, if we look at our API, we need to do latitude, comma, longitude, okay? So we can now do dollar, curly brackets. We can do latitude, comma, dollar, curly brackets, longitude, okay? So we'll console.log that out, weather URL. Okay, great stuff. And let's look at our URL again. Latitude and longitude. Have a look at the logs. Okay, so we've built a URL which says that. Okay. The other thing we need to do is we need to add on the app ID and the app key. Okay, so we'll take these here. I'm going to build that here. I'm going to do that on the end. Okay, so where do we get app ID and app key from? So these are what are called API keys, and they're secret. They're meant to be secrets. You're meant to keep them secret. So don't share them. Don't put them in public. All it means is someone else is using your account effectively. So your weather account in this case. So you don't really want that. So in Glitch and Node.js, you can have something called environment files, and this is .env, and this is secret. In Glitch, this means that if you can see all this code, I'll show you the URLs below, that you can see my code. If you want to put secrets into your applications, you can put them in the env file, and it means that other people won't be able to see them. So I'm going to do weather app ID equals and weather app key equals. Okay. And what I'm now going to do, and I'm going to hide this from you, is I'm going to put my app ID in here. And put my app key in there. Okay. I've obviously hidden those from you now. But what that means is we have something called process.env, and they're your environment variables. And what we can do is we can say app ID equals process.env.weather app ID. So we're going to get the app ID from weather app ID. The reason we're capitalizing app ID and weather app ID, it's just a convention for constants in most programming languages that you do them capitalized. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to do that. Const, what's the other one we need? App key equals process.env.weather app key. Okay. So now we should have, we'll need to do $, and a $, there. So we're going to take the app ID. It's going to be put into our URL there. We're going to take the app key variable. That's going to be put into as our app key query parameter. So now we should be able to make a request to that weather URL. So if you remember from last time, we used something called request promise. It's up here. Okay, and we had to set up how we were going to call it. So let's do the same thing now. Okay. So we've got our URL. We'll do our request options. Okay. I'm going to say the URI is the weather URL. And again, we want it to parse the JSON that we return. So we see JSON true. And there we go. Okay. So there are request options. And then we're going to make the request. So we say request promise. And we pass in the request options. And because it's a JavaScript promise, as we discussed last time, there we go. It's going to have a then function, which means when it's finished, it's asynchronous. It takes some time to finish, talk to the server. It's going to return us some data. Okay. So inside that data will be the weather. So let's just check that out. So what we'll do is, rather than that, take our response JSON, we'll put it in there. And what we'll do is we'll just say data. Okay, and that's going to give us our weather data back. Okay, so again, we'll just make the request. Weather, latitude, longitude. There we go. And the data it's got back is from the API from Weather Unlocked. Okay, so at the White House at the moment it's cloudy. Temperature 7.8 degrees centigrade, 46.04 degrees Fahrenheit, but it feels a little bit colder. Must be a wind there. Okay, so let's take that data and let's return it in a friendly format for Chatfuel. Okay, what we'll do is we'll say const response data. Okay, equals, and then we're going to write a new function called get current weather JSON. Okay, we're going to pass the data in which we've got back from the API, and what we're going to do is that data we've returned we're then going to spit out here as JSON, which will then go back to Chatfuel. Okay, so if we write this function above, again I'm going to use the ES6 style of function. So what do we call it? Get current weather JSON. Whoops. And it's an arrow function again. So what we're going to pass in is the data. That's the weather data. Okay. So the first thing we need to do, if we looked at our data before, we had, let's have a look at the Weather Unlocked API, and it'll tell us in here, oops, it will tell us in here in the current weather, the response format we get back. Let's have a look. Okay. So we're going to take out the WX description, the weather description. We'll take out the temperature in degrees centigrade. I'm in Britain, so I don't understand Fahrenheit. So yeah, we'll keep it at centigrade. And then we're going to do a feels like centigrade. Obviously, you can change these and pull out whatever you want. It's got things like wind speed and things like that. So let's take some of that data out. Okay, so first thing we'll do is take out temp underscore C. Okay. So let's get our temperature. We'll say const temperature. Oops, temperature. In fact, we'll write this as text. So we'll say temperature text. We'll use another template literal, and we'll take the data, and we'll take temp underscore C. So that is from the data that's back from the weather API. We're going to take out the degrees in centigrade, and then we'll put degrees centigrade, that little symbol, degree symbol, and centigrade. Okay. If we're going to return that now, we could do a return. And do you remember the Chatfuel format? We do messages. Yep, and that's an array. And then we need a message itself. So we can do text, and then we can do temperature text. Okay. So that's just going to return us a text here that we're just going to spit out. So let's just try that now, just to check it works. Latitude and longitude. Okay, so there's text 7.8 degrees C. Okay, sound good? Perhaps we should make that text a bit clearer. We'll say looks like the temperature. Looks like the temperature is, and that. Okay, maybe put a full stop at the end so it looks like a sentence. Okay, so that should return us the right data. Now, because we've set up our Chatfuel bot, let's have a look what it does. Let's type weather. It's going to ask me for my location. Send my location. So what this is going to do is take my latitude and longitude, pass it to my server. Hopefully, yes, looks like the temperature is 11 degrees C. Okay, so it's about 11 degrees C here, where I am in the evening, a little bit rainy. Not too cold, but we're starting to get a bit colder as we get into winter. So that's brilliant. Okay, so what else can we do? Well, let's send back an image. Okay, so I've got a set of images. I've taken all these from Giphy. Okay, I'm just going to paste this code and I'll explain it. Okay, obviously, sorry, I'm British. I don't understand your Fahrenheit scale, so I'm going to use degrees of C. So I've taken the data, the temperature, from our data. Okay, what I do is I do let. So let is just setting a variable which I can change. Const means I shouldn't change it later on. So what I do is I set it to be, this is a GIF representing hot. So if the temperature is under 5 degrees C, that means it's cold over here. So this GIF here is a cold GIF. Otherwise, if the temperature is below 15, it's normally raining in Britain, as I told you last time. So we'll have a rainy GIF. So anything below 5 degrees is a cold GIF. Anything then between 15 and 5, just under 15 and 5 is going to be the rain one. Otherwise, it's going to use the hot one. Okay, so let's return that as another message. Okay, should we do that as an image like we did last time? So what we need is an attachment. Okay, that's another object. It has a type, which is image. It has a payload. And if you remember last time, the payload is a URL. And that, in this case, is the image URL, okay? So what I've done is we've sent a piece of text back. Then we're going to send an attachment back, which represents an image. And the image URL is going to be from Giphy there, okay? So let's try that again. Let's do weather. It's going to ask me for my location again. Send location. Send a location. And hopefully we're going to get text. We're going to get a GIF. Yeah, it's raining. Obviously raining. As you can see here, we've still not set up our variables. So we said we could do that from within our code, and then we can use them in Chatfuel. Okay, so that's going to be a great thing we can do. Once we can get data in our server and give it back to Chatfuel, we can use it within the Chatfuel flows. Okay, so let's do that right now. So if we look at the Chatfuel documentation, let's have a look here. It says setting user attributes. So you can either set an attribute on a block. So when you tap a button, you do one of these values, or you can just set attributes. Now, if you look, we've got our messages array. Before we do that, we can set up attributes. So let's have a look at our JavaScript block here. So this is a JavaScript object. What we can do is we can do set attributes. Okay, so the key name is set attributes, and it expects an object. Okay, and within that, we're going to set the attributes. Okay, so what did we call them before? Let's have a look. We call them weather description. Okay, so let's take weather description. That's going to be our first variable we're going to set. And we're going to take data.wx desk, which is a description. If you remember, wx desk is a description, so it should say something like partly cloudy or whatever the weather is. It'll probably say rain here, I'm sure. The other one we had, let's check the variable name, weather feels like temperature. So this is what the weather feels like, not what the actual temperature is. So we'll set that, and we'll do data.feels like _c. So if you look on here, feels like _c. Yep. Okay. Okay, great. So we've got two variables here, weather description and weather feels like temp C. So these on this side, the keys are the Chatfuel attributes. On the right hand side here, this is the data we've got back from the API, and we're just taking that out, and we can set these attributes to be whatever we like. In this case, we're passing back weather data. Okay, so let's try that now. Okay, let's do our weather again. Weather. Okay, where do I live? Send my location. Excellent. Send the location. That's where I live. So as you can see, we've got our temperature, 11 degrees C. We've got our GIF that we sent, but also we've set up some attributes. So we've just set this from our server, and then we can use them in Chatfuel. As you can see, I've done 7.59. I've not done the degrees centigrade there. We can add that in. And then it says it's cloudy, which is a description. So it's cloudy here. Let's just make this text right. Degrees C. And it's, there we go. Let's just try that one more time. Weather. Boom, 7.59 degrees C. So temperature is 11, but it feels like 7.59. Absolutely fantastic. So hopefully you've learned something today. We've sent attributes from Chatfuel. We've used an API with an API key. We've returned some text and some images like we did last time, but we've also set some variables that we can then use in Chatfuel. Fantastic. So what's next? Well, I'm going to record another video for you next week, I'm also in the process of making you a cheat sheet. I want people to sign up. If you can sign up for a mailing list, I will send out the cheat sheet as soon as I've done it. What it's going to be is just some I'll call it a cookbook, some recipes, some code that you can use to quickly generate either static JSON, which will really help you, things like downloading files, playing audio, things like that, or also some advice on how to do these sort of things within a server. So if you sign up for that, that's bit.ly/bot sign up. I've changed the URL from last time. I've just made a nice landing page for that. So if you can fill in the questionnaire, tell me what you want to learn next. I'll put that in the next video. Okay, great. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Bot Building for Beginners.